The drama surrounding Meghan Markle and Tom Bauer couldn't be more intense. Say these names and it's as if the room goes silent. Meghan and Harry are no strangers to legal battles. They've been at war with newspapers, publishers, and photographers. Lawsuits are their weapon of choice. So when Bauer dropped Revenge, everyone expected the same fiery response. But nothing happened. No lawsuit. No injunction. Just whispers in the dark about potential legal action. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Because Bauer didn't attack Meghan. No, he didn't insult her. He laid out patterns, behaviors, and the consequences that followed. You can't shout these away, only silence them with hard evidence. But where was that evidence? Nowhere. That's why the threat of a lawsuit remained just that. Threatening, but empty.
Which is very revelatory, as you know, about Meghan and Harry. I got absolutely no help from the palace whatsoever, on the contrary.
I think it's mixed. I think that once she saw Meghan when she came to London in 2016, 2018, and she reached out to Victoria to get freebies. And I must say, it's always beyond Meghan. Meghan doesn't believe in reconciliation. Look at her appalling relationship with her father. She's a hard nut.
Meghan left Britain and then did the Oprah Winfrey interview. It's been really poisonous.
Mm-hmm. Well, he does it because he needs a profile. That's the only way they can get money, by showing the profile. And for Netflix, everything is built around the future documentary series to promote the Sussexes.
Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here. I think she has a major problem.
Why Meghan?
Well, because she posed a challenge to the royal family, and she's a fascinating person. I mean, she's a person who started from nothing and has become a world global star. And that route to the top has never really been properly reported and examined and investigated. In the trailer, there had 27,000 comments. 95% of them were negative. So they already knew there was a problem of the image. There was also the Vanity Fair article, which is, American Hustle was a huge blow.
We love it. We love to see it.
To Meghan. So it was opportune. And of course, by then she also knew that her brand was in great trouble.
Meghan had already recorded their poison for Netflix. It was already edited. All the stuff that we heard today about Charles lying, about William screaming and shouting, was in the can, was being edited.
Tom Bauer, where he doesn't go there. He doesn't go there. But he does go there as far as the fact that they wanted to keep the birth private and all the secrecy around that, and even the fact that...
To really understand why Meghan didn't file a lawsuit, you need to dig deep into what Bauer actually exposed. And it wasn't just rumors or empty accusations. No, Bauer built his case around hard facts, corroborated behavior. One of the most damning aspects of Revenge isn't the scandal, it's the consistency. Time and time again, Bauer gathered similar complaints about Meghan from different people, from different places, at different times, and none of these people had any reason to lie or to coordinate their stories. We're talking about former friends, staff, industry contacts, royal aides, media figures, all telling the same story. Bauer showcased a predictable arc in Meghan's relationships, intense charm at first, but once someone's usefulness fades, the hostility kicks in.
And she reached out to Victoria to get freebies. Victoria was happy to see her clothes on Meghan. Very good-looking woman, a duchess. Whatever Meghan was wearing would be an instant sellout. But Meghan had her own way of dealing with people who were trying to use her. She wanted not only freebies, but wanted some sort of payment too, which wasn't allowed under the rules of the royal palace. So that stung Meghan. I think Meghan then got worried, as I tell in the book.
That's what matters in a court of law. You don't need to prove motive, just the repetition of a pattern. Another thing Bauer explored with precision: control. Not fame, not ambition, control. Who speaks, who doesn't, who gets cut off, who gets a warning. Bauer spoke with numerous people who were too afraid to go on record, not because they disagreed with him, but because they feared retaliation. Legal threats, damaged reputations, careers on the line. Now, that's not defamatory, that's real fear. And here's here's where people miss the point. Bauer didn't present Meghan as powerless or unlucky. No, he framed her as a strategic operator, someone who's keenly aware of her public image, of how to leverage power, and how to use it to her advantage. That's a dangerous narrative for Meghan because in court, it wouldn't just be about defending herself. She'd have to explain why so many different, unrelated people describe her in the exact same way. Why do so many friendships end abruptly? Why do the same complaints from staff pop up time and again? Why are legal threats always a response to criticism?
These are words which he has rehearsed and which he's delivering to make a point, to make his own fortune. And of course, the casualty is not only the royal family, but Britain's reputation too. Across the world, it is really quite tragic that he's been allowed and encouraged to make these sort of allegations, which has no evidence. And of course, full of contradictions, dishonest.
And then there's the uncomfortable truth. If Meghan decided to sue Bauer, the courtroom would focus on the hard facts. No longer could she control the narrative. The legal process would force her to answer questions she can't dodge. And here's the key. Bauer's claims were carefully constructed, built to withstand cross-examination. There's no way around that. Meghan would be on the defensive, answering questions about the sources of Bauer's information, about the people who confirmed everything he wrote. She could try to discredit Bauer, sure, but at what cost? Once the floodgates open, everything Meghan's worked so hard to contain would be laid bare. That includes emails, messages, contracts, everything. No more control.
Oh, on the contrary, I think she's a very scheming, very clever woman. No, I think the surprising thing at the end of the book, I realized how successful she'd been. Here was a woman who was nothing. I mean, born, broken family, the whole thing, unknown actress, all the rest of it, becomes a global star, which is what she wanted.
What's worse is this. Meghan's legal team would have to uncover Bauer's sources, people who, for years, have kept quiet for fear of professional ruin. Once those identities are revealed, Meghan would have no control over whether those people testify in court. And if they do, well, that's when things start to get really dangerous. The court would demand records, emails, texts, schedules, PR meetings, everything. Meghan could lose far more than a simple defamation case. This could unravel the entire narrative she's built piece by piece. Bauer's entire book is built on evidence, documents, records, third-party confirmations. If Meghan decided to take him on, she'd be opening the door to her own secrets. That's the nightmare scenario. Not only would her private communications come to light, but the process could expose far more than she ever wanted to reveal.
That 2025 was going to be the year of the Markle sparkle. And maybe she would say in the last few weeks as she's accepting a Humanitarian of the Year award, she might say, see, but for the most part, I didn't see that.
That's why, for all the legal threats Meghan's camp has dropped, there's no actual lawsuit. Because once a lawsuit is filed, the pressure to produce evidence is undeniable. Bauer doesn't rely on hearsay. He's built his case on what can be proven, not what is believed. And in court, that's what matters. Meghan's legal threats, however, are just part of the strategy. They're intended to silence critics, they're meant to keep everyone afraid of crossing her, but the longer this goes on without a filing, the more the threat begins to lose its power. It no longer intimidates anyone. In fact, people start to ask, why hasn't she sued yet? The longer this goes on, the less serious the threat becomes. And that's when Meghan's camp loses the upper hand. What's ironic is that Meghan has mastered the art of pressuring smaller voices, but when it comes to Bauer, who has no corporate backing, no media empire, he's the one who can withstand the pressure. It's a different ballgame when you're up against someone who has nothing to lose. Bauer's exposure is limited to his research file, but Meghan? Her entire life is documented, timestamped, and cross-referenced by people who no longer owe her anything. And that, my friends, is the real reason why the lawsuit threat has remained nothing more than an empty bluff. Bauer's work doesn't make bold claims. It doesn't need to. It documents behavior over time, patterns that are undeniable when you take a step back. He doesn't need to point fingers. He lets the evidence speak for itself. And Meghan knows that, which is why she hasn't filed. Because if she does, it's it's not just about defending herself. It's about revealing truths she cannot control. And once those truths are out in the open, the game changes forever. The longer she stays silent, the more the questions grow. Why hasn't she done it? Why hasn't she taken legal action against Bauer? Is it fear? Or is it something much worse? Something she can't afford to have in a courtroom? That's the power of Tom Bauer. Not the book itself, but the silence that follows. Because silence is the one thing Meghan cannot control. There's a brutal truth that many people refuse to acknowledge when it comes to Meghan Markle and Tom Bauer. The longer she avoids suing him, the louder the question becomes, why hasn't she? And each time that silence stretches on, it shifts the narrative. Meghan has long prided herself on controlling the story, shaping her image as she saw fit. But against Bauer, she's losing that control, and every hint of a lawsuit only makes it worse. It's like a game of chess, where Meghan's moves seem calculated, but they're only taking her into checkmate. If she was ever serious about taking legal action, the truth is, she should have done it when the book first dropped. The moment those pages hit the shelves, Meghan's lawyers should have moved fast. But instead, they kept hinting at legal action, fueling a narrative that it was all just too much. The book, the truth, the way Bauer exposed her to the world. But what happened? Nothing, just talk. That's when people began to notice. They saw the cracks in the story, the delayed threats, the constant references to lawsuits without any substance. And now, the question is no longer will she sue, but why hasn't she already? Tom Bauer isn't someone who's just chasing attention. He's not after headlines. He's someone who knows the power of silence. The kind of silence Meghan can't afford to have hanging over her. And it's that silence that is louder than any lawsuit. Because when Meghan starts hinting at a lawsuit now, it's not about justice. It's about control, about regaining the narrative that's slipping through her fingers. But every time she lets another day go by without filing, the more people start to question her credibility. And that, my friends, is when the cracks in the royal facade really start to show. People are starting to realize that Meghan's tactics have always been about controlling the narrative, not about defending the truth. She uses silence as a weapon, hoping it will keep her critics in check. But the longer this game goes on without any legal action, the more people will see it for what it really is, an act of desperation. Meghan's legal threats aren't about stopping Bauer. They're about stopping the inevitable, her eventual loss of control over the narrative. What's so dangerous for Meghan and why she can't afford to let this play out in court is that Bauer's investigation isn't just based on gossip or secondhand information. He's built this case on facts, emails, messages, schedules, real physical proof. It's no longer just a tale of Meghan's ambition. Bauer has tied everything together with receipts, and that's where the danger lies. Because once Meghan opens that courtroom door, her secrets, her patterns, her relationships, her strategic moves will come under the spotlight. And let's not forget Bauer's ability to connect the dots. His work doesn't rely on conjecture, but it's built on timelines, corroborated accounts, and third-party confirmations that no one can easily dismiss. That's where Meghan's real problem lies. If she sued him, she'd have to enter a battle she cannot control, one where every part of her strategy will be exposed. From emails with PR teams, to private meetings with agents, to the way she's used her public image to gain influence. Bauer's book is a record, a timeline of her rise, and more importantly, the methods she used to get there. And what's worse, his work isn't finished. Bauer has kept material back, things he hasn't even published yet. Imagine what could happen if those secrets are unleashed. So Meghan's legal team dances around the idea of a lawsuit, but they know better than anyone else, this is the fight they're not prepared to take. Because suing Bauer wouldn't just be about defending against what's written, it would be about explaining why so many people from all corners of her life, describe her behavior in the exact same way. It would be about explaining why so many relationships ended abruptly, why staff members quit, why the narrative always shifts depending on the platform or the audience. That's the kind of testimony that Meghan cannot afford to face. The moment the courtroom starts pulling in witnesses, the moment those former friends, staff, and industry insiders are forced to testify, it's game over. And that's the thing about Bauer's book. It's not just a biography, it's a blueprint, a map of everything Meghan has worked so hard to conceal. Every contradiction, every missing piece, every silenced voice, it's all laid out. And once that map is drawn, every new contradiction, every new silence only sharpens paints the picture. Meghan can't afford to open those doors, not when so many people are waiting to walk through them. The worst part, even if she did win the case, even if Meghan managed to convince the court on narrow technicalities, the damage would already be done. The process alone would expose far more than the book ever did. And worse, it would expose the truth. Meghan's own records would be dragged into court. Emails, texts, contracts, private conversations. It's not just about what's been written, it's about what's been said in private. And that's the trap. Because once that truth starts spilling out, there's no going back. And no amount of PR can fix it. That's why we're stuck in this bizarre standoff. Meghan and her camp keep talking about a lawsuit, but it's never more than a whisper. They want you to think it's coming. They want you to feel the pressure. But behind the scenes, the truth is clear. Meghan is terrified of the discovery phase. She knows what's hidden in those emails. She knows what's buried in those conversations. And she knows that the longer she stays silent, the more people will question why. So while the world waits for a lawsuit that never comes, the real question lingers. What happens when the silence finally breaks? Will it be Meghan who cracks, or will Tom Bauer's map finally reveal everything she's worked so hard to bury? So hard to bury. So hard to bury. So